So I'm going to shut my camera off so you're not distracted by that. And I'll focus on reference solutions. So you can see that I'm accessing the database through St. Louis County Library System. We have that logo there. Few things, we do offer webinars, so you may attend any of those. There's no charge. The only thing is that obviously your time. We do have some great information under the Learning Center, and I do like to point that out real quick. Let me select that. And first of all, our contact information is here in several spots. You can always feel free to reach out to us. Certainly, the library staff is more than capable of assisting you as well. But no, you have all kinds of support if that is something that you'd like. The information I wanted to point out is under this marketing and training materials tab. So we have these flyers that introduce some of the great information and the various tools that you can use that I'll cover today. If in fact you're fairly adept at searching databases, this may give you just enough information for you to be off and flying. If you need a bit more information, obviously we have these database overviews. I happen to like these that are broken out based on each of our modules. So know that we have those as well. And we do provide you with this data dictionary for both our business and our household information. So if you had a question about some piece of information and it wasn't self-explanatory, you could refer to that in order to understand that. So take advantage of those materials if you'd like. The other thing that I like to point out would be these personal accounts. So you do have the ability through the library to download information. Maybe you want to download it into Excel, and perhaps you're planning on sending out a mailer and you would like to be able to get that name, address information so that you could do that. You can always download. However, if it would be beneficial for you, you can also, if once you've registered, you can save your searches. It's not a shortcut to getting into the database. You would still need to log in through St. Louis County Library System in order to be able to select our link, input your ID PIN number, and then you'd be here. So this would be an additional step. You would log in using whatever email address and password you created for your personal account. At which point in time, like I say, you can save actually 7 out of these modules that are available. The only one you can't save would be the jobs and internships. But all these others, you can save them and come back to them at whatever point in time is good for you. The nice thing about that is all of these modules have a different update schedule. So we call businesses annually to verify, obviously, the name of the business. We try and capture who that owner or manager is, number of employees, what other lines of business might they be in. As we capture that information, we're pushing that out live every third Thursday of the month. So what that means is 12 times a year, that's going through that update process. The same is true with the historical business information, which can be great data that you could utilize. Maybe you're considering opening a business at a particular address. You could go into the historical business database, input that address, and then do a small radius around that address to see if over time those businesses that would be your neighbors, have those businesses been there for a while? Are they pretty stable? Or have businesses been coming and going? Maybe that location isn't the best for you. So that would help you determine that, right? This is being updated at the beginning of every new month. So now that we just ended September, anything that we updated in September, now that we're in October, it becomes a historical record. So just realize we're pulling those across each and every month. Our US new businesses, these are new business filings that we're getting through the Secretary of State's office. We also get them from utility hookups as well as postal processing. So when mail starts to go to that new business address, we're updating this universe weekly, and they will remain in here in that rather limited form. It's not like there's a lot of data with that new business filing. They'll remain in there for 1 year. Our US healthcare, which would be these physicians and dentists, we do have that business record for that doctor's office in the US business database. This module is going to be about that doctor or about that dentist. Where did they go to school? What year did they graduate? What's their medical specialty? Do they accept new patients? That kind of information. We're updating this universe monthly. I have a nephew that lives in Denver, Colorado, and he uses this module quite frequently. He sells to doctors and dentists' offices around the United States. He sells a transcription service option to these physicians and dentists. So it can be a great tool depending on what your need might be. Standard white pages, just like you would see if you opened up the phone book. However, we have added 4 additional pieces of information to these, and that would be the census block group and tract number that dwelling is assigned through the Census Bureau. And then we also overlay the neighborhood's estimated income and home value based on what the Census Bureau has identified. So that's going to be those 4 additional pieces of information that are added to that standard white pages. But again, if you needed to understand based on what you're attempting to perhaps sell to consumers, if that's the case, maybe you would like to be able to use that estimated home income. And that would be true whether we're talking about the standard white pages or the consumer lifestyles. Maybe you would like to be able to identify that audience based on that income. Most businesses do, right? You don't want to attempt to sell something to someone who wouldn't be able to afford perhaps your products or services. So that can be a great tool to use, as is the consumer lifestyles. So we're obtaining this information. Obviously, this is basically the phone book plus this information. We're obtaining that information from hundreds of different sources. I was not in this database when I first moved back into Omaha. I had a dog at that time. He became ill. I took him to the vet, fearing that it was something significant. Turns out, after the vet did some testing, that he was reacting to the dog food that I had been feeding him for years, but that dog food manufacturer had made some type of change with those ingredients they included in that dog food. My dog couldn't palate it anymore. So instead of trying to figure out what it was, the vet said, be easiest and least expensive to go and get him an all meat or an all fish or an all poultry product. I happen to have a Petco near where I live, so I found a dog food there that he really did well with. I ended up becoming a PALS member, which is their discount program. And within a couple of months, I became known as a dog lover because I had it all tied back to that address, right? Now, I do get this question, especially when looking at this kind of data. Do you know how much they spend on perhaps their dogs? Don't know how much they spend. Do you know how many dogs they might have? Don't know how many dogs they might have. So That type of information isn't something that you could obtain through the database. We have in this module a scoring system. Will only present records, those individual records, when someone is scoring a 6 through a 9. So that scoring system is 0 through 9, will only present records for those individuals that are falling in that 6 to 9 range. And I'll show you what that looks like. And last but not least, and I think this is a great module for businesses to recognize, if your business is about doing business with consumers, these are brand new consumers that have come into your community, or it can be framed in that fashion. And let me show you what I mean. I'm going to open up the US new movers, new homeowners. We're getting this information on a weekly basis through our license agreement with the United States Postal Service's National Change of Address. So as you can see, when I open up any module, I'll always come to this quick search tab first. In this case, I'm going to go right over to advanced search. And I do like to point out this section here that refers to additional filters. This is the back door, and that's the case in every one of our modules. This is the back door into advanced search. It's not like you're going to see something different when you click there versus clicking on advanced search. It will present to you this next page. And here's where I can begin using some of those filters that are important to me to be able to identify these people that are perhaps new to my area. So let's do this. I'm going to select move. I'm going to come under relocation details. I'm going to select both of these, move distance and time frame. Now let's say that we don't want to know about anybody who's moved within St. Louis County. We want to know about those people that are truly new to St. Louis County. So you can start the mileage distance out at whatever number you think is appropriate. I'll just guess and say it's 60 miles across St. Louis County. It might be less, it might be more, but for sake of this demonstration, I'll just say 60 miles. So I'm going to get both coasts involved here. So I'm going to say 2,800 miles is where I want to go. So it's going to go east, west, down to Florida, etc., up to North Dakota. So I've identified that. Then it's a matter of what geography do I want to use? Do I want to look at the entire county? Do I want to look just in the city? Do I want to look in just a zip code or two or three? You get to define what that is going to look like. So let's do this. Jessica, I'm going to put you on the spot. Give me a zip code in St. Louis County that would be one that would have, whether it's apartments or single family homes, etc. Give me a zip code that I could look at here.
Sure. 63026 is where.
026. I'm there. So I can quickly, this is my total universe as of right now. I'm telling the system, let's start it at 60 miles and go all the way out to 2,800. Notice the default is always 6 months. You could make it as recent as last week or within the last year, right? So let's just do the last 6 months and see what I have in that zip code. So I have 97 in that one zip code. Jessica, could I beg you for another one? Uh-oh, did I put you on the spot?
I didn't realize I was muted still. Sorry. We actually had a suggestion in the chat for 63144.
144. Boy, that's almost Omaha here. It's 68144. So I'm going to do that. So it jumped it up to 163. So you can see how I could change this too. If I wanted to make this 50 instead of 60, that's going to probably increase that number a bit. So you can see how you can alter these things, these filters, in order to get to the kind of information that's important. I know that when I do these kinds of presentations, I always like to try and find out, are there any realtors or insurance people that are in the audience? Simply because oftentimes they want to know about this home ownership. So we would have confirmed homeowners, probable renters. There is a fourth category, but we didn't make it queryable, and that is not available. We just don't have enough insight to make a call one way or the other. So let's look at these that are confirmed or probable homeowners of this 166. I've got 64. So let's say that I have a bug killing service. This could be that audience that I might want to reach out to and let them know about my service and this discount that I'm offering on first time acquisitions of my service. Could definitely do something like that. Maybe even renters would be appropriate for that group, right? It doesn't matter. So as you can see, when I add that renter, it jumps it up to 106, clearly not 164 though. And that's because the rest of those are just not available, right? We just don't have enough information available. I'm going to remove this because I want you to see that entire group. So here are their records. Now notice, we always put this information out there on any of our consumer records, and that is telephone numbers displayed. And notice here, there aren't any. That's not something that somebody fills out or includes when they're filling out that national change of address. But there is an international national change of address, and I have seen phone numbers as a result of that. But in any case, we always put this message out there for all of our consumer information, indicating that they could be on the do not call list and should not be used for phone solicitation. Ultimately, you, the user, are responsible for the compliance with that. I like to add to that, you do have options to get a clean list. Now, clearly we have no phone numbers, so that wouldn't be a matter here. But if we had phone numbers, you can get a clean list by downloading those that you would like and then sending it to the do not call registry. They will look up all those phone numbers and send you back a list that you could call against. You can also, by the way, hire us to do that. We do that kind of work as well. Just depends, but there'll always be a fee involved. And that's true for any of our consumer related modules. I do want to introduce this chart feature. Now notice I have this home ownership. I have all this information with either confirmed, probable, renter, etc. I can change this up if I would like to and overlay that move distance. So you can see on this first page, here's a couple that have moved from 1,700 miles away. So certainly, if that kind of insight is important to you, by all means, we have that here or when you open the record. What I wanted to show you though with charts is I can understand this audience right away as it relates to both home income and home value. So the first thing it always gives you is that home value. I could switch that up to that income and be able to make some determinations based on those numbers that I'm seeing about whom I'm going to market to. All of this information is something that you can print off or you can include in a PowerPoint presentation. And I know that lots of the folks that I work with that are perhaps seeking services through the library or through SCORE or through small business development center networks or even business incubators. They'll often have them include this graphic if it helps to tell the story about what they need for their loan. So this can be some great information that you could capture. We also have our heat map. This is a density map. When I have fewer than 300 records, which is clear here, when I select that and open that up, you'll see here how it's going to pinpoint those locations. So there's one of those zip codes and there's another one of those zip codes. It'll always pinpoint that information. Once I have more than 300, it's going to give us a different graphic, and I'll show you what that looks like. So know that you can take advantage of this as well, and that can be printed off or made part of a PowerPoint. The information contained will just go right up here to Robert. We've got that name and address. Moved from 283 miles away, is a probable homeowner. There's that neighborhood information. So we're getting that census block group and tract number, which allows us to overlay all these estimates based on what we're seeing through the Census Bureau. So that, again, can be some great information that you would have access to, obviously pretty quickly. I mean, granted, I'm doing some explaining, but it's once you understand how to search the database, you can get to that information that's most important to you quite readily. I would point out, notice it does state that you can get 250 downloads. So let me go back to that list. I only have 166. So with 250, that would be downloading a total of 10 pages. Clearly, I only have 7, so I'm not going to download 10, but I can select that empty box next to first name, then use this right toggle, and you'll get to page 2, 3, you get the idea. And then once you're ready, you can go to your download option. Once here, the first question you must answer is that file format. Most people go with this comma delimited because it is mailing label friendly. Step 2, what level of detail do you need? Again, most people will go with that summary because it's going to give that name, address. We know there aren't going to be any phone numbers in this one. And then it's a matter of, do I want to email these records to myself? Maybe I'm working with someone else and I want to include them on that email as well. Or do I want to be the master keeper, if you will, of those downloaded records? Just depends on how you want to do that. You would simply select either one of those, go through that process. And then if you did have more than 250 that you were going to download, maybe there was 1,000, you could do that in 4 downloads, but they have to be 250 at a time. If that's the case, you would always be left here. You want to select the word back, because if you use your back arrow, it'll go all the way back to page 1. What you want to do is identify what page you left off on. If this were 10, obviously it would be the 10th page. Then you do need to get rid of these check marks. Easiest way to do that, and this is true for all of the modules. Easiest way to do that, revise search. We didn't forget how you built this. You would then view your results again. It brings you back to page 1. All those check marks are gone. You would just type in page 11 here and hit enter. Or in the case of what I did 4 pages. So I would put in page 5 and hit enter. And it's taken me to that 5th page. And I can begin selecting more records for download.
Bill, when you
yes.
download the records, does it download as a PDF?
It downloads it into Excel, and then you're able to manipulate those those cells within Excel based on what you might need.
Sure. Thank you.
You bet. And like I said, it is mailing label friendly. So if you have a program on your computer that would allow you to make mailing labels, you can put that right into that program and then put those mailers together. I have a cousin that is in Gainesville, Florida, and he uses the database when he has a carpet and tile cleaning service. When he gets a new customer in an area, he'll put in that customer's address and do a radius around that to see if he can get more business. He'll send out mailers and see if he can get more business. He even gets permission from that homeowner to use their name in some cases. Sometimes they say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. But others will say, you bet, Jim, go right ahead. So if that's something that you would like to consider, by gosh, anything that would help you get in the next door, right? So I have that kind of information, can certainly do what I need. And maybe that's it. Maybe I'm done now and I'm going to go about creating my labels or whatever it might be. But in this case, we're not quite done because we have some other modules to look at. Any other questions regarding new movers, new homeowners? Otherwise, I want to go to the business database real quick.
Doesn't look like we have any questions in the
Okay.
chat. Moment.
We can always come back. If something comes to mind in 10 minutes, we can always go back. I'm going to select reference solutions, going to bring me right back here to the home page. I can open up again any of these modules. I'll go to the US business database. Again, we'll come to this quick search screen first. You know, maybe you need to look up a company because you're not quite certain what that company's primary line of business is, but you'd like to find more of those businesses like them. So we categorize all of these businesses not based on the products that they make, but the industry in which they're in. So restaurants are all together, whether they're Greek restaurants or German restaurants or pizza restaurants or whatever, they're all together. Manufacturing, all together. Construction, all together. And they're all together linked by what's called the SIC code. That's the Standard Industrial Classification Code. It's an old coding system that Uncle Sam came up with in the mid-30s. It has technically been retired by Uncle Sam, but we've kept it alive because we've made it more granular than it ever was when in use by Uncle Sam. So I'm going to show you an example of those SIC codes. Let's do this. Let's just go to St. Louis. And I can't remember if it lets me go there this way. Oh, yes, it does. Well, it still let me get there. And I'll do Mo. Where Mo? Where are you at, Mo? I know you're down there somewhere. There it is. So I'm looking at all businesses that have been verified. That's the thing with quick search. It's only looking at our verified records. We can get to two other record types, which I'll show you momentarily. But this is just my verified records, of which I have 56, almost 57,000 verified business records. I'm going to use that chart again. I'm going to introduce the chart because this will help me understand those businesses based on that SIC code that they're under. So 19,000 of these make up that top 7. Physicians and surgeons are at the top of that list. Look at nearly 11,000 of them. That's usually the way it is in most communities of size because those physicians, they're all 1099 guys and gals. So that's why there are so many. There might be 5 of them in one office together, and they're sharing the expenses of that office, but they're not sharing each other's profit by any means. So that's why you see so many there, followed by nurse practitioners, attorneys, restaurants. Notice we do have mailing kiosks. We also have automated teller machines. And in that 7th position would be churches. So I always have this view. And then I can also get to a full report. Notice that's 150 pages in length. It always has that primary SIC code that they're under, the description for it, and then the number of records that apply. So if I want to get into any of these, maybe I want to get into these home health services businesses, I could click on that 475 and it will take me right to that group. So no, you can even move around two businesses within that charts universe. But let me go back here because I want to point out some of the other qualifiers that I can use here. So I do have the more recent coding system, which is called the NAICS code. That's the North American Industrial Classification Systems code. Wow, that's a mouthful. So when Bill Clinton was president and signed that very first North American trade agreement between us, Mexico, and Canada, that's when these were born. Apparently, the SIC codes weren't going to get it done. That's when these were born. Most federal agencies will use these NAICS codes. We have both linked. Could switch this up to the zip codes around the area. Certainly those sales volumes. And please understand that when we're talking about these sales volumes, specifically with a private company, that's modeled information. And we've been modeling this for 52 years. So we're using how long they've been in business because there's value in that length of business time. We're looking at the primary line of business along with anything else that they may do. We also look at the number of employees because that goes into that model. And about 72% of the businesses will give us an exact number. Those that choose not to answer that question, what we'll do is we'll look at their peers in that area and we'll assign a range. So when you see that range, you just know on that record, you just know that that was not a question that they chose to answer. Then we also get information that finalizes that modeling through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we're going through that information on all of those private businesses and modeling that. If it's a publicly traded, of course, we'll get that from their 10K report. We do have that employment size. Like I mentioned, 72% of those businesses give us that. Those that don't, we'll assign a range similar to what you're seeing here, right? And we'll give you that specifically in each and every one of those records. So if you see an exact number, they answered that question. And it really is up to them if they want to answer that or not. Again, this can all be printed off or it can be made part of a PowerPoint. So certainly take advantage of that insight. It helps you make sense of these businesses. So let me revise this and let's get into the meat of it because that's in the advanced search universe. So I'll select that. It's going to open up a new page here for me. Right off the bat, notice the default is to those verified records. Now, we also have these unverified businesses, not yet fully verified, may not be accurate. I always point this out to folks because you know your community. Just because we weren't fortunate enough to get them verified doesn't mean that they aren't open for business, right? So your community, you may want to check this out periodically, especially if you're looking at this as a sales tool. And then of course we have our closed universe, and this is closed as of this last 12 months, right? So it keeps running month over month. And then once we get to the end of December, it's all historical at that point. And we'll start anew with those closed businesses that we identify. So know that those are your three options. I'll leave it default to that verified. Now, in terms of filters and how they're used, this doesn't get used a whole lot because generally speaking, people are looking for more than one or two or three businesses by name, right? You would add business A, add it, business B, add it, business C, add it. And if that was the only thing you need, by all means, you could just produce those three records based on whatever geography you select. Otherwise, most people want as many businesses by name or with a name, and that's what we'll always give you. So these don't get a lot of use. Executive information, especially these last three, those get plenty of use. Let me give you an example like with the title. Maybe you would like to find businesses that have an owner present. You don't want a manager, you don't want a CFO, you just want those businesses with an owner present. You can either scroll through the list and find owner, or you can begin to key that in. You can see I've done this a lot. That's why my list comes up. There's my owner. I can click on it, add it to this box. And basically what I'm telling the system now, I don't want to see any records that wouldn't have an owner present. So if that kind of search would be important, and maybe it is one of these other designations for CEOs or CFOs, you can use any of that. We have HR, as you can see when you go through that list. So if HR is important, we have that. Just depends on what you would like to use. If you use nothing, we'll always give you whatever we have. Period. Same thing would be true with gender and ethnicity. And we've recently also added female, veteran, and minority owned businesses here. We're getting this information through the SBA PPP loans that these people have been awarded. So if that were a search you wanted to do, by all means, you could do that as well. I'll scroll back here, business type. This gets used a lot. Keyword, right? Most people don't have SIC codes in their back pocket, but we know that this gets a lot of use. For example, I could put in restaurants, I could put in dry cleaners, I could put in manufacturing, I could put in auto sales, used, new, whatever I want. I can put that keyword in and then select it and drive that into this selected box. And that tells the system that's the kind of business that I must see based on whatever geography you select. We also, and I'll give you an example with this in a moment, we also give you access to this major industry group, which is just the SIC codes. And it always starts off with these 2-digit numbers that Uncle Sam assigned these various types of businesses. I'll go under construction. So we've got 15 through 17. I can click that plus symbol. It gives me a definition for each of those 2-digit codes. I'll go down through general contractors. Gives me now that 4-digit code. And this is where Uncle Sam stopped. They didn't go any further with this. We added 2 more digits to make it this much more granular. So if you needed to find businesses that do water damage restoration, you could tell the system that that's what you need to see. It's kind of a visual stair-step approach. Some people like this. That way, maybe I just can't think of that terminology, right? Oh, I knew they do water work. Well, if you put water work in, I don't know that that would come up with the appropriate definition. But this obviously tells you exactly what this company does. And if it needs to be their primary line of business, in other words, what they do day in and day out, you can scroll right to the bottom and tell the system, and I need this to be their primary line of business, period. So know that you can get that specific if you need to, and that can be done either through the keyword or the major industry group, and I'll show you that in the keyword. Geography speaks for itself. I will show you this map-based search tool. That might be of value. Phone doesn't get a lot of use because people might mainly want phone numbers, right? But you could get just those companies that maybe have toll-free numbers, or you could limit your results to just those businesses that are in this area code if you wanted to do something like that. Otherwise, we're always going to give you that phone number, and if there's an 800 number, we'll give that to you as well. Business size, number of employees, it's a popular one. So is sales volumes. We'll always give you these ranges. Know that you can create your own range if you would like to here. You can select this show more options, and maybe you want just those locations. And by gosh, these businesses should have at least 3 to 12 employees. That's my range. For whatever reason, that's my range. If you need to be that specific, by all means do so. And the same thing would work with sales volume. So it's up to you, however you would like to use that. Ownership, we give you lots of ways to look at that, public or private, headquarters, branch. And if you think about it, there's a couple of other types of owner, and that would be those that are subsidiaries of branches or those single locations. This gets a lot of use. So this is my total number of verified records. Look at what happens when I designate single only. Look at how many there are. 15 million plus that are single location businesses. Now you could really get, if you wanted to, maybe I want to know how many of these businesses employ 1 to 4 people. I could do that. Notice that 10 million plus. Talk about small businesses being our economic engine. That's it. They are, period. So great way to be able to look at information if that's the kind of data that you need. Certainly, we give you those home-based businesses, and when you select this, it either includes them or it excludes them. If you don't choose this at all, you'll always have them in your records. So just be aware of that. We also give you those government offices, so it will break them down by federal, state, county, municipal. And then we have our financial data. So certainly you could always look at certain stock exchanges, right? Maybe understanding business expenditures. I was down in Atlanta a few weeks ago, and a lady, she only used 2 filters if we don't count the already designated verified. She only used 2 filters, her county and this filter. So she wanted to know those businesses that were spending this kind of money on their technology needs in her county of Gwinnett, Georgia. So if business expenditures would be a search that you wanted to include or a filter that you wanted to include, by all means, you can do that. Just depends. We're all unique. We all have unique needs. I have some special selects. I could certainly pull in those web addresses. If you're looking for newer businesses, I would use years in the database over year established. This isn't 100% full, but this is, we know how long we've had them. So if you wanted, and you can frame this a few different ways, maybe you don't want brand new businesses. Maybe your idea of brand new is the first 3 years, but you want them older than that. You can certainly go ahead and define that as your older universe and get just those records. All depends on what you need. So certainly feel free to use that as a filter. Notice we do have professionals, all or one. If you wanted to know, maybe you're looking in a zip code and you wanted to know that there was a doctor's office at a particular address, but you didn't care about knowing about every doc in that office. In other words, those 5 that share that location, you can choose to alter this from all to 1. You'll produce fewer records. And especially if you plan on sending out a mailer, it's going to cost you less to do so because you won't be mailing to every attorney or every doctor that's in a particular office. And another filter that we've recently added is this mailing address. Perhaps you'd only like to send out a postcard to those that have a highly deliverable address. In other words, they pick up their mail, period. So if that kind of filter would be useful, by all means, you have that. And then we give you a lot of ways you can omit information. There's those ATMs and kiosks. Maybe you don't need those in your records. You could just choose to omit those if you would like to. You can omit anything. Maybe you want to look around all of St. Louis County, but you want to omit one or two cities. Bingo, you could do that. Just depends on how you want to do that. And you could even omit previously saved searches. So, few ways. Let me show you. This is just a really simple search. I happen to like to use restaurants because it always produces enough in terms of records. And where is my designation? There it is. Wow, I thought I'd lost it for a second. So I'm going to do restaurant. You can see I've done that before. I'm going to select that. I'm looking for that result. That's what I'm looking for right now. There it is. There's the SIC code and that description. I'm going to click on it, add it here. I can add as many as I want. If I wanted hotels next or whatever else, I could keep adding. Doesn't matter. I'm looking at all SIC codes. So that's a hint. And we're going to do this against your county. So I'll go Mo here first. And I will go. Oh, get out of there. There it is. And I have a total of 2,273 restaurants around the county. And I'm looking at all. Watch what happens when I tell the system, I need that to be their primary line of business. Dropped it down to 1,700. So what we took out are, for example, convenience stores. Lots of times they'll have 2 or 3 tables and they refer to that as their restaurant area, right? Or bowling alleys. Think about every bowling alley you've ever been in. Most of them have a little counter, a little cafe, a little restaurant in there. We've taken them out of the mix. So if that's truly what you need, it's as simple as going to that universe. Now, if I chart this, I've already told the system what I'm looking at, restaurants, right? So it's going to know that, and it's going to know where. St. Louis Mo. It now gives me the breakdown based on those cities. So here's my top 7 cities around the county. And then, of course, my full report here. Again, I could switch that up to that sales volume, to that number of employees, etc. And this is the first time we've looked at the heat map with more records. So now that I have over 300 records, this is what it will produce. So where you see those red areas, lots of restaurants there. Yellow, fewer, green, less. And where there's any gaps or holes, there are no restaurants in those areas. So if you're looking at coverage, and again, often we're just looking at one county, we could be looking at a much larger area. When you're looking at coverage, if this would help you to explain to your lender what you need in terms of this loan and why this would become part of that, bingo, you have that justification right there. It helps them to get that visual perspective. So either can be used. Again, I can download this information just like I did with that consumer data. I do want to advance a couple of pages here because I like to show this example and it works out pretty well. So Arby's is on page 3. I'm going to go back to page 2 and we're going to start with Applebee's. So notice I have this corporate tree information. I'm going to go with Applebee's first. The up arrow, if you selected that, it would take you to one record and one record only. It'll either be the subsidiary responsible for all of the Applebee's, or if there weren't a subsidiary, it would take you to the ultimate parent. This will show you their entire organizational flowchart. So let me click on that. And here's my Applebee's. They're in Baldwin. They report up to this Applebee's Services Group out of Pasadena, but they're ultimately owned by this Dine Brands Global, also out of Pasadena. We do give you a legend across here, so you can see PC is about a private, or excuse me, a public company, their PC, and of course my subsidiary information. Now, they have 3 subsidiaries. You can either scroll down through all these records or collapse this one, and there they are. So certainly something to take into consideration. Pretty healthy business, right? Uh, Certainly something, if this kind of insight is important to you, you do have access to that. Now let me show you Arby's. We all know that they have the meats, right? That's we've heard that commercial. So here's my Arby's information. I'm going to open up this record though, because I want you to know that you can also get to that same data from inside the record. So let me select that org chart. It's going to open up a similar page to what we saw a moment ago, although it's a much larger company with 47 subsidiaries, over 61,000 branches. They are a private company. It's Rourke Capital Group out of Atlanta. So here's my Arby's in Brentwood, Mo. They report up to this restaurant group out of Atlanta, but they're ultimately owned here by Rourke. And if I want to get to those other subsidiaries, look at their cousins. Look at Applebee's cousins. I'm sure as you look at that list, you see a lot of companies that you recognize. Buffalo Wild Wings, Baskin Robbins, Cinnabon. You may be familiar with this little Dunkin' Donuts company. They were just added to their portfolio during the pandemic in October of 2020. So they used to own Massage Envy. They've sold them off. They used to own Quiznos. They've sold them off. They used to own Cabela's, which is now owned by a Missouri company called Bass Pro. So with these larger companies, we call them 4 times a year to get updates about things that have changed. Maybe it's businesses being added, maybe businesses being subtracted. So you always have information here. And if I wanted to sell something to Arby's, wouldn't it be great to know that they also own Sonic, right? I might be able to increase the sales opportunity knowing some of these things. So we'll always give you that kind of data as well. And this is atypical record. So we're going to have that name, address information. There's that phone number. Excuse me. Certainly the website, social links they use. There's that industry profile. So there's that SIC code. I'd mentioned earlier, if there was a business that you wanted to find out what line of business is their primary line of business, here it is. And then you could jot this number down. And when you do another search, you could input that in that keyword section and click search, and it will go out and give you that code and that definition. And then you could click on it, select it, and then find more businesses like them. So kind of a reverse engineering of a search. There's a business profile, so we know when they were opened, where at they were opened, etc. We do have Google Maps embedded in here because we have that latitude and longitude in the background, so we know where they're at. We have that number of employees. So we last updated this record in July. It'll be updated again next July. We've had them in our database for a couple of minutes anyway. There's that management directory, company news. This is coming through Bing, and it's literally loaded on the fly. So let's see when the last article was done, 10/3. So yesterday at 5:48 p.m. Central Standard Time. Oh, and that's something to do with that darn hurricane. It just depends. And if this news information would be of value to you, know you can get to this. Now, if this were a little small company, a mom and pop shop, chances are we're not going to have anything news related to them. But great way to be able to get some of that information that might be of value to you. Obviously, there's no stock data on this because it's a private company, but even if it were publicly traded, like Applebee's, we're not going to have stock data on each Applebee's location. It's only going to be on that parent. Those business expenditures, and this information is modeled for private companies, just as that sales number is. Then we have some historical information, including historical years. And our historical records go back as far as 1997. That's when somebody had the great idea, hey, why aren't we hanging on to this? Instead of just sweeping it up off the cutting room floor. We also have UCC filing. So if they've taken out a loan and put something up as collateral, that information is captured there. In this case, none. See it every once in a while on RVs. Nearby businesses, again, because that lat long that we have in the background. And then, of course, the competitors record. So each and every record will have a competitor's information unless it's a nonprofit. Hospitals, nonprofits, churches, those types of entities won't have a competitor's report. But I could even get into, maybe I want to get into this Frank's restaurant. I could click on that business name and get right there. So if that kind of search would be of value, by all means, it's available. Any questions in regards to that information?
Nothing in the chat so
Nothing
far.
in the chat. Well, let me point this out, this data feedback button. So you can suggest an update to any record, whether that's any of our records, I'll say that. If this were the jobs and internships, we don't control ZipRecruiter, so I can't update that stuff. But I can update any of our records, and this is our record. So if you wanted to, maybe they had 25 employees instead of that 20. You could come in here as it notes it's going to be sent off to these researchers. And based on the check mark that you put in the box next to the item or items that you want us to research, we'll certainly do that. And then we'll get back to you within 2 business days about what we learned. So let's say it were that number of employees. You could come right in here and you could put in that 25 and then fill out this information, submit it to us. We'll send you back an immediate response thanking you for that query. And then, like I say, within 1 to 2 business days, you'll get a summary of what was done. For example, I did one of these. I received an email from a restaurant, and I usually don't open those up, but I did this one because it was interesting. It was called Bird Dog Cafe, and I thought maybe they carry pheasant. So I open it up. It's a restaurant in New York City, but I was kind of interested. And I thought, I'm going to go see if I can find their website. We did not have a website listed. So I found it. Noticed on the website that it said how many employees they had, because that was not a question that they answered. And nor was it in terms of who that owner or manager might be. So I filled in all of those 3, submitted it. Within a couple of days, I get a response back. They were able to verify the website. They were able to verify the owner. They would not verify the number of employees, which I got right from their website. So it's up to the business if they want that information made available or not. Otherwise, we're always going to, as you know, we're going to then look at their peers in that area and we'll assign a range.
And Bill, is there a section for online businesses?
There is. Now, you can look them up like e-commerce, right? But I can tell you that e-commerce is one of those gray areas, right? So if they don't, for example, and this isn't even e-commerce, I have a niece in Chicago. Her business is not listed in here. She has her automobile to get to her appointments. She does have a staff of 5 other people. She has a great client list. of customers that are uh, very well off, we'll say. And her business is she does everything from planning events, parties, weddings, whatever it might be, to babysitting kids because mom and dad can't get home from the office on time, to taking kids to doctor's appointments for the parents, to dog sitting, house sitting, does all that kind of stuff. She's got this great client list, but she couldn't walk into a bank and just show them that client list and expect to get a loan against that. So she's not in our database because she's not tied to anything. She has a web page, not even a website, but just a web page that describes her business and her automobile in that list of clients that she's built up over the last 12 to 15 years, but she's not in our database. So an e-commerce business, if they're not tied to anything, they don't have a number we can reach them, they're probably going to end up in that unverified universe as versus verified. So you can certainly check that unverified. E-commerce, by the way, is a designation for a type of industry. So you could always search e-commerce. You can search nonprofits. Great question.
Another question. Somebody says that she's struggling finding the appropriate SIC or NAIS codes for their business. One company I found online that provides similar services has their SIC and NAIS codes listed as unclassified.
Yeah, that's kind of that. So Uncle Sam, and obviously we have to do the same thing. Uncle Sam had that kind of that catch-all, and that's what that is. In other words, they really don't know how to classify that business. So if that's the case, we have to kind of stick with that.
Then somebody else asked, what's the difference between a web page and website?
So her web page doesn't take you into a price like a cost sheet, if you will. It's just a description of her business, but there's no, you can't drill into anything, get examples. There's no testimonials, none of that stuff. That's why I call it a web page. They may call it a website, but I call it a web page.
Thank you.
Other questions? Let's do this. I am going to select reference solutions. I see we have about 10 minutes left. I do want to show you the consumer lifestyles. So I want to say it was 2 years ago, Jessica, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The library offered a business fair at 5 different branches, if I recall. I think it was a Monday through a Friday. And they did 5 different libraries, maybe it was 4 different libraries. And they had invited SCORE, they invited the SBDC, they invited somebody from Economic Development, Chamber of Commerce, myself and a couple of other vendors. We all took time to kind of share what it is that we do. This example I'm going to show you was an example of something that I did with a participant at one of those libraries here a couple of years ago. It really stuck out to me for a couple of reasons. Number one, she had this dynamite personality. So it'd be one of those people that you just wouldn't forget easily. She and her husband, and he was the silent partner. I don't think he said more than 2 words, or maybe 3. She makes, he assists. They make this costume jewelry, but it's not your everyday run of the mill, put some beads together and call it good. He is a retired silversmith, and some of the work that he put into those pieces were incredible. So she wanted to be able to use the business database to find boutiques that she was going to reach out to, and she wanted those boutiques to have an owner present because she was going to reach out to them and see if she couldn't arrange a deal where she could be able to sell some of her pieces at those boutiques, right? Because they'd have the perfect customer for her. She also has a website, And she does do some of that marketing via the website. So she was going to do some promotional outreach to consumers that would be interested in her products. So we went right into the consumer lifestyles, and it brings you to the quick search page. I'm going to go right over to advanced search because this is where my filters are. We did one per household. She didn't want more than she didn't want three names at the same address, right? So she wanted one record that would be considered the head of household. And I've had gentlemen that have confronted me because their wife's name was on the head, was identified as that head of household, and they thought they should have been. But when I began to question them about how frequently they're going out to buy products and stuff for the house, they're like, oh, no, she does a lot of that. And that's when they come to understand, okay, so head of household, it's not a designation about who's boss. It's about who's doing the shopping. So one per household. Let's do this. We'll just do your county. So I'll get Mo here, there, Mo. And there, where'd you go? There you go. And here's the lifestyles characteristics. So I'm going to select that scoring system that I mentioned, 0 through 9. If somebody's a 0 in any of these categories, if somebody's a 0, their record's not going to show. In fact, it won't show if they're a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. It's only those records where somebody's scoring a 6 through a 9. So they're active in that category. As I mentioned before, I was a dog lover because I was buying all that dog food at Petco, and I had signed up for the PALS discount. So a couple of different ways that they identified this guy's a dog lover. So what she wanted from this universe is she was interested in apparel, fashion, and beauty. And she said, Bill, would you open that up? And I did. What she wanted, and she could have really made any of these her selection or all of them at once, because she does make products for children. She makes products for men and women. So she wanted to go with just accessories, none of these other ones. So we got one per household, accessories across the entire county. How many records do I have? 122,000 individual homes. Obviously, could be apartments as well. So she's like, oh, I'm not going to market to that many people. And I get that. So what we ended up doing is we did a radius. So we got rid of the county. We went to radius. And in radius, you can put in, and that's what we did. She gave me her address and her zip code. And then we put in a number of miles around her address to find a smaller universe that she could then do some postcard marketing to. She wasn't going to do any phone calls. She didn't want to have to go through the do not call registry. Jessica, would you be so kind as to just give me that zip code again? I think it was
63026.
026. There it is. And I'll do 3 miles around that. Notice I can go as little as 1 block all the way up to 150 miles. So I'm going to say 3, and I've used 3 before. There it is. I'm going to update my count. So now I have 5,789 opportunities. She said, well, that's still a bit too big for me, Bill. But I said, wait a minute, let's do this. So we viewed those results. You've seen me use this chart before. So in doing this, it's going to give me that home value and home income. I can use that insight to decide, and there's that home value. It always comes up with home value first, we went over to income, and then we were able to decide, okay, with this income information, since I don't want that entire universe, I'm going to choose a few of these ranges, right? So let's do this. I'm going to revise my search. And I'm going to grab a couple of those. I'm going to do the 100 to 124, and I'm going to do the 150 to 174. Update my count. Now that I've added that, so now I have 1,400, certainly more manageable. And I don't have to necessarily do them all at once, right? So I can view those results. And let's take a look at this. Here's the reason that that record came in. So I have that name and address information, been in this home for a couple of minutes, appears married. There's that neighborhood information that we're getting through the Census Bureau that allows us to overlay this information. Percent of owner occupied housing, that is, or that represents number of apartments in that area. So the higher that number is, the fewer there are with apartments, because that always has an impact on that home value and home income. Then here are those lifestyle interests. The only reason that this record came in was because they scored a 6 through a 9 on accessories. Just because you see these other headings, don't assume that if you selected those, that this record will automatically appear. It may not, because even though it's listed here, they may not fall in that 6 through 9 range. So all of these other ones, it's not about 6 through 9 with them. They could actually be, in terms of general cooking, they could actually be a 2. So please understand that. But this is why this record came in. And then, of course, we have this final section. Now, everything, and it's all classified under this consumer snapshot. So as you can see, I've got age here all the way down to veteran present. Let me show you if I want to use any of those classifications. And here it is right here, consumer snapshot. I'll grab age, I'll grab marital status, and I'll even grab presence of children. So I'll grab some age ranges here. I'll say married, children. I have now 255 records that all fall into these 3 categories. I'll go to view that. And notice I no longer see actual records. We suppressed that at that point. The only thing you can do is put it on a chart, a matrix, or a table. So if I wanted age, I don't care about presence of children because those 255 all had the presence of children. I do care about this home income and that age, and I want to do it against the zip code that they're in. We know there's only one zip code here. But we do have this view then. So here's my estimated home incomes with those 2 groups, the age ranges that they're in, the zip code, and then the number of records in that area. And I guess there is more than one zip code simply because I did that radius instead of using just that one zip code. So whenever you come to that consumer snapshot section, if you select anything out of there, this is what you'll get. Any questions? Gosh darn it. I'm sorry I went over. I didn't mean to. I hope that was helpful. Uh-oh. Jessica, it would appear I've lost you. I don't see you listed anymore. And I don't know if that means everyone is gone or not.
Hi, Bill, this is Regina. No, we've got participants. Are we finished? This is fantastic conversation.
Excellent, Regina. Thank you so much. I just didn't see Jessica's name there listed there anymore. And I thought, oh no, I lost everybody.